we're doing something on long-term planning, how long-term planning might change the goals of nature-based strategies. And I was really kind of giggled a little earlier because in one of the earlier panels, somebody asked if there was any planning going on beyond 2070. And I kind of said, well, you know, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. And why is this not going? I'll go up to the, that's okay, I'll just do it here. Oh. Now we got too far. Okay. It's still like, no, it's not. It's got the wrong thing on here. What, nothing's happening. No, I mean, this is advancing, but that's not advancing.
Yeah, that's a problem that I don't know how to fix.
So thank you for sticking around for the last session, first of all.
Yeah.
And
So
second,
this is changing, but that's
we often think about changing scale, and we live in a certain human scale, right? We see the landscape in our eyes, and we think about our day and our week and our lifetime. But nature doesn't do that. They think about multiple scales, multiple spatial scales and multiple temporal scales. And so today we're going to be thinking a little bit about the temporal scale, about what we used to look like, and how decisions, human decisions, so if we look at these three essential principles of coastal resilience, coastal systems are always adapting and changing. That's true. We have to know that. And so that fact that it's changing in a way we don't like or we do like, it's going to change, that it is a human natural system, and that's every system on Earth has human influence, and every human is being affected by nature. And we have the responsibility to choose our relationship, our future relationship. We have the responsibility to choose our current relationship, and maybe that worked out the way that we thought, or maybe it didn't. So just a little introductory here.
Thanks so much. And so here you see, we're going to look here in terms of looking to the past to try to look to the future. And so really to understand how the history of current day Boston shapes the future responses of climate change impacts. And this is a slide of Fort Point Channel, which kind of shows how built up our city environment is. And I said I'm going to talk about the past in terms of how things may affect the present, and I'm going to go way back. I do want to say this is in contrast. This is a natural shoreline of how things may have looked prior to our colonization. So you can see the difference between what's happening today and what happened in the past. And so here we are. This is looking at Boston Harbor as it would have looked 20,000 years ago. And so it's covered with glacier. This would be about 8,000 years ago, and you can see that Boston Harbor was primarily dry land, and there was a riverine environment going through it. This is 6,000 years ago. You can see more water starting to move in if you look on the upper right side. This is 3,000 years in the past, where you see the start of Boston Harbor. You can see some of the harbor islands. The rivers right now are very prominent. And here's 1630. So this is at the time of colonization. This is today. You can see the incredible built environment. And then we have the possibility of what things might look like in 2100. And so I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
So getting from 1630 to today, we are one of the most filled coastal cities in the world. And what you see here is that a number of these landfill projects have changed the shoreline for a variety of different reasons over time. We're going to play this twice, and you might recognize some of these places that are your, say, Back Bay was a bay. Fenway Park is there. You might find that some of these regions were filled. You'll see East Boston was 5 islands, but now we're going to put in an airport. The Castle Island was an island, and it became a park. You see more white than green there. The original isthmus across Washington Street to downtown Boston was surrounded by water, but now you don't see that it is that. So when you walk the streets of Boston, you don't think about the history and what it might have looked like. Each one of these decisions was made for a reason, right? There was a system, a set of people there that said, we're going to do this for a reason, and sometimes it's transportation, and sometimes it's for land reclamation, and sometimes it's for commerce, and sometimes it's for recreation, and sometimes it's for the airport as transportation. There was a lot of times that the tidal activity at low tide with the sewage coming out of an increasing population made it smell bad. And they didn't like that, so we buried it with land, and we covered it with water by damming the rivers. So here is the first sort of big project, Mill Pond, was done for energy. Let's get some industry going with the tidal energy. Didn't work that great, but once we put that causeway across, we said, well, now it's kind of mucky, and maybe we should just fill it up and have a whole bunch of new land for us. So they weren't envisioning, let's put Seaport in here in a couple hundred years. They're saying, let's just do the thing that we need to do in our landscape, our lifetime sort of vision. Back Bay filled because of the sewage on the mud flats at low tide. Let's put a railway system to get goods in and out, but then that is a permanent structure, right, that is blocking off tidal lands. The Charles River Dam, right by the Museum of Science, because we wanted to permanently bury in water all of that smelly stuff, and then became the dirty Charles River that they began to clean up. The airport, and I'll admit right here, this university is all landfill next to a sewage pipe that was an access road, and because it was a tidal mud flat, let's fill, and that was really, really cheap for us because it was a landfill, and now we have this beautiful property on the waterfront that was not meant to be land. So not in the original vision. So here are a couple sort of landscape, humanscape visions of what you might see. The first image, this is the salt marshes and the canoes and the coastal things that you might get a little bit of experience on the islands when you go visit there. And what you see now is the bottom image on the streetscape, a very different thing that was not expected, I think, when you layered on sort of all of those pieces. Again, a map on the right of the fill. Where did the material come from? Well, let's find the nearest source, Beacon Hill, and carve it apart. So permanently removing some of the famous Beacon Hill and putting it into Back Bay. And so that, again, lasts for hundreds of years into the future and future generations that will experience the land in a very different way. Long Wharf used to be a half a mile long. Quincy Market and Faneuil Hall was the port, but it was really, really hard to get ships into the shallow water, so we put a half-mile wharf and said, put the ships out here, and then we can just drive them sort of into the Faneuil Hall. Oh, and now we have sort of some more land that we can reclaim and put these things. When you're in Faneuil Hall, you're not thinking that you're in the on the coastline, even though we have some artwork that shows you where that is. And Long Wharf is not that long anymore. Mystic River, there was the upper Mystic Dam put in to get water to Charlestown because they needed sort of water. And we put I-93 in, that's a transportation system, completely blocked off things. And so what used to be tidal then became blocked off again at the Amelia Earhart Dam. It looks completely different system. So the things that we did, the Emerald Necklace was sort of very thinking forward that we want to preserve some green spaces, but also changing the entire set of waterways while we develop the urban city. So again, all of these decisions were made by humans for reasons, a variety of different reasons, over shorter timescales. And it ended up starting what we looked at and finishing what we see today. What do we want for 200 years from now? And are the decisions that we're making today on nature-based approaches to coastal resilience, to seawalls, to airports, to protection, to retreat, to berms, what we want to see, and what do we want to see in 200 years from now, or 7 generations, when generational changes can really change what our vision is, but we should probably think about it at least a little bit while we are very busy day to day in our 3- and 5-year funded projects.
Okay, quick show of hands. Who is from Boston or has spent a lot of time in Boston? A number of you. So I apologize because some of this will be old news to you guys. For the rest of you who are not from Boston or not familiar with it, welcome to Boston. So glad to have you here. My job is to show us where we are today. So what does this area look like today? I think Elizabeth and Bob did a fantastic job showing us the history of the area. We are just a blip in somebody else's time lapse of this area moving forward, right? So let's remember that we are part of a system that's constantly changing, and we need to think about where we are today and where we've come from to think about where we go next. So I'm gonna just give a quick, I could have pulled like 3 hours worth of slides together on this. So welcome to my, this is what I could take quick screenshots of because I wasn't gonna map anything originally for this presentation, sorry. So here we are, we need to think about who's here, right? A lot of conversations the past day and a half have talked about environmental justice populations, right? And when you look at this map, I've put some stars in. So working from north to south, that first star, which I think is green, is the area around Long Wharf, which Bob just talked about. And then the orange star is the Seaport District, for those of you who are familiar with it. And then that green star down by the green blob, that's where we are right now, that's Columbia Point. These are our environmental justice communities. In Massachusetts, we have census block level data on who lives there, and the state uses that data to determine whether or not something is an environmental justice community. And you guys can see better than I can because I didn't bring my glasses up. But you can see why each area was designated what it is. And what you see is that, like a lot of urban areas, there are environmental justice communities all over the place. There aren't a whole lot in the downtown area by the port, but you can see elsewhere along the coast there's an awful lot of environmental justice populations. This is important to think of for resiliency for a number of reasons. First, we know that not everybody is affected equally by climate change, and so we can anticipate that some of these folks in these communities will be harder hit than others. The other thing to think about, which, you know, when you're trying to think about the hope and the positivity with regard to climate change, is that these are the people that could benefit the most from the decisions that we make with regard to resiliency. So if we can create some sort of a resiliency that has a community benefit, like increased public access for folks, that's something to keep in mind when we think about who's living here. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball to know who will be living here in the future, but we can anticipate that this will be something that looks like this will exist in this space for years to come. The other thing to think about, which I'm so glad we followed the Living Seawalls project because I don't have to talk about this for very long, but you can see the state maps what they call wetland resource areas. These are areas that are protected under the Wetland Protection Act, both at the state and the municipal level. If you look at the picture to the far right, I'm not sure you can even pick them out. They're there. It's mostly tidal flats and mostly tidal flats. I think there's a couple of rocky shorelines, salt marshes. You saw great pictures in the last slide that even though they're small, there's still a lot of stuff that lives there. We can anticipate that some of these tidal flats will be gone as sea levels rise, right? The picture to the left shows the same situation in the Seaport District, and then if we move down towards where we are right now, you can see that there are still a lot of places where there's salt marsh and tidal flats. Again, we'll probably see a lot of this lost as sea levels rise, but it's there now. And again, you saw much better pictures and video footage in the last presentation, but these habitats support actual living organisms. Sorry to the plant lovers, but I forgot to put plants on these slides. Another way to look at the city is impervious surfaces, right? So this is an old map, 2005. I imagine that things look pretty much the same. I was looking for specific statistics and I couldn't find anything perfect, but it looked like between 70 and 80% of the city of Boston is covered in impervious surfaces. And this is some flooding projections for the future, which you can see in the map to the left shows the original shoreline in white and the current shoreline outlined in orange. And it takes no stretch of the imagination to wonder why we're going to see flooding in the places that are showing up as potential flood-prone areas, because those are the original fill areas that Bob was describing. I just want to zoom in on two specific places to give you a sense of what the current conditions are. So that picture at the top of Long Wharf, that white box around it shows the original extent of the wharf, so you can see exactly how much has been filled in. The map to the left shows, I believe it's 2050, the 1% flood. There's another map I could have put up that was all blue that said, will this be underwater in 2050? The answer is yes. No surprise, because we see that now, right? This is, I think, 2018, 2019, Grayson, whenever Grayson was, is that picture with the car in it. And then the picture to the right is a sunny day, wicked high tide, which is terrifying. If you've never gone to a wicked high tide event, Stone Living Lab does great ones. Figure out how to, I don't know, Joe, do you post them on the website? Make sure you figure out how to get down there, because it's pretty terrifying. This is the Seaport District. So if we think about historic decisions, right, Long Wharf was filled in a long time ago, sort of out of our hands. People didn't know about climate change at that point. Marshes were swamps and dirty and whatever, right? That was the way that people were thinking. So there are some current decisions that have been made, now that we know what we know, that are still showing that, development is happening in vulnerable areas. So here's the Seaport District. Back when I first came to Boston, it was parking garages, or parking lots, right? Very vacant, also really prone to flooding. And over the last couple decades, the Seaport District has really developed. A lot of buildings, a lot of roads, a lot of commerce, a lot of infrastructure in a very flood-prone area. So, I definitely don't want to give the impression that nothing is happening with regard to climate change, and for those of you who were at the closing plenary last night, you know that the city is doing an awful lot. They're raising parks. The Living Seawall is a great example of a resilience project now. There's rain gardens, there's the pollinator highway on top of the bus routes. There's lots of rain gardens. The city is really working on ways to promote resilience. But I think that what we want to talk about is really what comes next, right? So just taking a quick pause, there was a lot that was just described in terms of what's happened in the city over the past hundreds to thousands of years, right? When human decisions were driving things, there were a lot of values behind those decisions. So just a shout out, right? What sort of values, what sort of things did you guys hear as driving the decisions? Money. Convenience. Space. Population growth. Money for the few. Aesthetics. Convenience. Health. Control. What was the one over here? Commerce. Yeah, so you can see there's like a lot of different things at play. I didn't hear anything about ecosystem services. I didn't hear anything about biodiversity. I didn't hear anything about equity. Interesting. I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth to get you guys talking at your tables. Oh, you don't need my microphone.
So this is where you work. And actually talk with each other. It's not really, hopefully it's not really work. And so really kind of want to have folks on the tables like looking back at either some of the examples that we gave in terms of Long Wharf and how that the decision to fill in there has led to flooding here with sea level rise, how landfill and what is called land reclamation, which I really don't like that term, but how that has affected flooding in terms of where there's water is going to go, where it once was, it wants to go back. And also even in terms of the emerald necklace, in terms of that was something that was done not necessarily not necessarily only for aesthetic purposes, but a lot of it was, and even that has some repercussions now. And so one of the things I'd like to have you take 10 minutes at your table to discuss are either one or all of the following questions. Looking back at those past decisions, what did people miss or misunderstand at the time in terms of what was happening what was going to happen in the future? How is the decision affecting people today? Is the intended purpose or the value that was used to make those decisions still relevant and addressing current needs? And if we could go back, what would you advise? And what do you think could have been done differently? So it would be great if you just kind of spend 10 minutes at your table just discussing this, and we'll check back. Okay, in the interest of time, I know it hasn't been 10 minutes, but we actually took a look at the time and said like, ooh, maybe we don't have as much time as we thought. And so we are going to actually switch the questions and to have you start thinking about looking forward. And so in terms of if there's a current climate-related issue that you're trying to address or that you're particularly interested in, then look at the questions like, what is the purpose? Why are you doing it? What's the value behind it? How does considering the impact of past decisions inform how we are thinking about the decisions we're making now? How might people 100 to 200 years from now think about or judge what we are doing now? What might we do to take into consideration the needs, perspectives that might be in place 100 to 200 years from now? And can the purpose that we're putting forth now serve over a long horizon? And what sorts of information, tools, and resources would be helpful in informing those decisions? So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes, and then I would ask folks, not required, but I would be really great if someone from some of the groups could share out what you came up with. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I hear a lot of great conversations. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what folks might want to share back. We have about 5 minutes to do that. And so Kristin is going to go around, or all of us can go around with mics. But if, some brave table will start it off, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, so our table talked about the Blue Line development and the impact of rising sea levels on it, where mass transport affords a buildup of higher density housing, but then the risks imposed by sea level rise on the Blue Line, whereas like the MBTA has limited its options of, building it higher or potentially terminating service on the Blue Line, and how that would impact the communities that have built up around it. And so we kind of talked about the need for kind of breaking out the silos of developers, of municipal planners, of transportation, or whereas like these decisions have to be made kind of in concert with each other, rather than the typical progression of transportation begetting development,
Is that okay? So we didn't get too far on the first slide in terms of looking backwards. And the general conclusion that we had on our table was they probably did know a lot about some of the negative impacts that all of the various actions were having, generally speaking. we did let them get away with the whole climate change thing. We figured, we're actually pretty sure that they didn't foresee what's actually going on now from a climate change perspective. So we'll give them that. With this one, this slide looking forward, we did start having a serious conversation, but there was a lot of negativity and a lot of guilt and absolving ourselves in some ways, and so it sort of descended into silliness in some ways. But the question about how might people 100 to 200 years from now think about and judge us, well, genuinely, we actually said, well, if they're here, and Skynet was mentioned, and the machines, I think we're all feeling a bit like that. But and then we got into a conversation about rigs to reefs and talking about artificial things being left behind in the marine environment because they might be the best possible solution from a biodiversity perspective moving forward. And then I don't know if you guys have come across this institute and book called Seasteading. It's genuinely one of the most harmful and dangerous things I've ever come across in my life. This is not me advocating you reading this book, but I do just Google it and have a quick look at it. But it's basically promoting this idea of modular living on floating islands in the face of sea level rise and climate change. And there's a tagline under it saying, saving the world from politicians and climate change and this and that. It's crazy stuff. Like really, really crazy stuff. I was telling these guys, there's even a paragraph in the book that advocates eating whale shark because they are, lower down the food chain from a fish perspective. So, yeah, it's pretty negative on this table. Apologies. I wish we had some hope, but maybe we should go to a hopeful table.
Thanks. I think we had time for one more table. If there's. Hopefully it is maybe a little bit more positive, but hey, it's valid. It's like, will people be here in 200 years? We don't know. Yes.
Yeah, I think we were going between hope and despair. So I guess I can summarize, and you guys please chime in if I'm totally making this up. So we essentially said, let's give nature the room that it needs to do its thing. Yes, we will have impacts where communities are in direct conflict with nature, but going back to the indigenous wisdom of living and thriving with nature is probably a good direction to collectively go in, and whether that means that we still operate in a capitalistic frame of thinking or not is an option. But yeah, seems like we've overtaken land and water and consumed what we feel like we needed, but it's maybe time to let nature take back what belongs to it.
Thanks. I think, are we out of time? I think no? Yes, so, yeah. So hopefully this was engaging and gave you a chance also to get to know some other folks on your table at least in a slightly different way. And I'm gonna give a plug for Kristin, Bob, and I have developed a workshop that is basically a one-day workshop looking at value-based planning for climate change. We don't know when it'll be and where it will be, but within the next year, we'll be doing at least one of them. And so just wanted, if you are interested, feel free to reach out to the organizers and they can get in touch with us. And it's basically a full day kind of considering these questions, which is a very different way than we usually do when we're trying to think about immediate solutions. So thanks, everybody.
I have just a couple wrap-up comments. Again, thank you all for your thoughts, and maybe it's in a different way to end the conference. I've been thinking a lot about these questions over the last couple years of the Stone Living Lab, working with Elizabeth and Kristin and all of you. what do I want? I would like equitable access to the shorelines, because I think they're powerful and useful, and it's not equitable access now, and we can improve that. I would like to enhance curiosity along our shorelines. Enhance curiosity, not educate about, but be curious about. That's why I am an oceanographer. It's because I was curious about a shoreline that was natural. And I think I want sustainable relationship, positive relationship with the shoreline for my great, 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 great grandkids. And how we get there, and every project that I take on now, and everything that I do in the short term, needs to lead to those three values. So if you think about that in your daily work, a lot of times what we do on the daily work is in contrast to those long-term visions. We should give a couple seconds, maybe a day, a workshop, to think about the long-term vision collectively, and then think about how our work on the day-to-day, when we're doing the thing and raising money and proposals and everything else, projects, how does that fit in, and am I working against that or towards that? And so hopefully we give you a little bit of thought as we wrap up this conference. But it's just the beginning of the work and the thinking, and let's continue the conversation. And like I say, join the workshop, watch the website, and we're here to have the conversation.